Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the Monday Night Raw review. And I'm going to jump right into the review because this show was absolutely fucking terrible tonight. This was a shit show for Monday Night Raw. We had a NXT superstar coming up from NXT to the main roster, which, my God, I'll wait until I get to that. But this show, like I said, was fucking terrible. What did we see that was good on this show tonight? Aside from the main event, absolutely nothing. We had Raw Failure Ground, and we saw a Lumberjack match between Asuka and Sasha Banks, and the Raw Women's Championship was on the line. But let's jump right into the review. Didn't get to review Dynamite or SummerSlam over the weekend because I was busy. Last night during SummerSlam I had to work, so couldn't get a SummerSlam review out last night or a Dynamite review on Saturday because I DVR'd it, and the DVR cut off right when the Women's Tag Team Cup Tournament was going on. It was the final match, which I am glad that Brandy Rhodes, they didn't make Brandy Rhodes and Allie win that match because, at first I said, oh, they're going to make Brandy Rhodes win that whole tournament, of course, because of Cody. And fortunately, that wasn't the case. So, but from what I read, Diamante and Ivelisse won it, which was good. So, but here we go with the Raw review. So Monday Night Raw opened up with Drew McIntyre. McIntyre ended up coming out still the WWE Champion, which he ended up defeating Randy Orton last night at SummerSlam. And yes, I did see the results for SummerSlam. And my reaction to the results, I'm like, knew pretty much the results, some of them. But McIntyre ended up welcoming everyone to Monday Night Raw. And this is the first Monday Night Raw live in many months. The first Raw in the Thunderdome. So McIntyre ended up getting the fans, the virtual fans, to give him a thumbs up, which they all did. And there was a point here where there was something in the Thunderdome. A fan ended up putting up a picture of course, Chris Benoit, which you would see the picture right here. I'm going to put the picture of that fan that did that. So here's the picture. And why would that fan do that? I'm surprised, WWE didn't boot that fan that put up that picture of Chris Benoit, out. Because WWE, they said, oh yeah, if you do something like that, or wear like AEW clothes, oh, we're gonna boot you out of the Thunderdome, of the virtual fan thing. And they didn't do it. So we saw that. So McIntyre ended up going on about why he beat Randy Orton at SummerSlam. He said that he's hungrier than Randy Orton and that he works harder. He ended up going on to say that he's proud to be the WWE Champion. So McIntyre ended up knowing what it's like to wonder where your next paycheck is coming from. He ended up saying that's something Randy Orton has never experienced because Orton has always been protected. So McIntyre ended up ranting about Orton and says that Orton recently declared himself as the greatest wrestler ever for winning the match at Backlash. So McIntyre ended up challenging Orton to step up again, so he can Claymore his head off this time. So McIntyre ended up getting out of the ring. He ended up going up the stage. He ended up raising the WWE Championship. And Randy Orton then attacked McIntyre from behind. Both of them ended up brawling. Orton ended up unloading on McIntyre, sent McIntyre into the LED board. And they ended up brawling to the back in gorilla position. So Orton ended up going for McIntyre's eyes, ended up sending McIntyre face first into the wall. And officials end up coming in to break up the brawl. And Orton then end up punk kicking McIntyre in the head, which you could tell that Orton ended up botching that kick. And then McIntyre ended up stumbling around on the floor. Orton ended up staring down at McIntyre and delivered another kick, another punk kick to McIntyre. And that was pretty much basically that. But all in all, it was an okay segment from McIntyre. And then when Raw came back from the commercial, officials were trying to help up McIntyre. And then we saw Sarah Schreiber. Sarah Schreiber ended up stopping Nia Jax for, comments. She was asking why Nia Jax is even here. Nia Jax ended up telling Sarah Schreiber, where her manners are. Sarah Schreiber ended up reminding Nia Jax that she was suspended by putting her hands on an official. And Nia Jax ended up telling her that all she had to do was go to that official, who was, of course, Pat Buck, and apologize. So Nia Jax then ended up yelling at Sarah Schreiber. She ended up turning around, and Shayna Baszler ended up approaching her. Baszler ended up saying that we're all counting down until when Nia Jax gets herself suspended again. So Nia Jax ended up offering to help Shayna in her match against Bayley. So both of them end up taking a few shots at each other, and that was basically that. And then we had Shayna Baszler versus Bayley, which the match itself was, in my opinion. Nothing special happened in the match. Nothing great. You had Nia Jax end up making her way down. She was on the stage. She ended up staring at Shayna Baszler. And Raw went to commercial then. Monday Night Raw came back from the commercial. Nia Jax was still out there. She was still watching the match from the ramp. And at the end of the match, you had Nia Jax end up running down, and she ended up pulling Shayna Baszler, and she ended up pulling her by her leg. And then the referee ended up seeing that. The ref called for the bell, so Shayna Baszler ended up winning the match by disqualification. So Nia Jax ended up hitting Shayna Baszler again. Baszler ended up trying to fight back, but Nia Jax was working her over. In the ring, we saw Sasha and Bayley. They were smiling at what happened, on the outside between Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. And then we saw Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler end up staring down at Sasha and Bayley. And Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler then exited the ring. They end up staring down Sasha and Bayley, and pretty much that was basically that. The overall match was very in my opinion. Nothing special happened. Nothing great happened. And then we went to Kevin Owens. He was backstage looking for Aleister Black, and Kevin Owens then finds Aleister Black's room, knocks on the door, and Owens was wondering if Aleister Black was still going to appear on the Kevin Owens show. And Owens says he will see him out there. Kevin Owens ended up walking off. We saw an arm reach out to shut the door, and that was that. And then Kevin Owens was out for the Kevin Owens show. Kevin Owens ends up welcoming us to the first Kevin Owens show in the Thunderdome. He ended up talking about how tonight's guest is special. He says he's someone we haven't seen in a little while, and how they have a common enemy. So Kevin Owens ended up going on, and he introduced Aleister Black. And Aleister Black, his music ended up hidden. He was nowhere to be seen. He didn't have the entrance where he would be raising up from that plank. So he ended up coming out just as a regular superstar does, and he's wearing a black cover over his right eye, and he wore that because of the attack by Buddy Murphy that was ordered by Seth Rollins that we saw a couple of weeks back. So Aleister Black ended up stopping as he made his way down to the ring. He ended up staring at the ring steps, and he looked like he was going to climb the ring steps, but he changed his mind and he didn't use the ring steps to get into the ring. He just slid under the bottom rope. So Kevin Owens ended up asking Black how he's doing and how his eye is feeling. So Aleister Black ended up telling Kevin Owens to show the footage of what happened, of how his eye is like that. So Kevin Owens ended up saying that he doesn't think we need to see that footage. But Aleister Black ended up assisting Kevin Owens to roll that footage. And of course, it was the footage that we've seen of Buddy Murphy injuring Aleister Black's eye that Buddy Murphy was ordered to by Seth Rollins. So Owens ended up thinking that he knows exactly what Black is feeling, because Seth Rollins and Buddy Murphy can get under their skin. Kevin Owens ended up saying that they did it to him, making him question why he's here. So Kevin Owens ended up, he was still talking, and Black ended up stumbling out of his chair on one knee. Kevin Owens ends up getting up. He ends up checking on Aleister Black. Kevin Owens then ends up calling for help. And then Aleister Black ends up hitting Kevin Owens and delivers the Black Mass to Kevin Owens. Aleister Black ends up staring down at Kevin Owens on the mat. And then he made his way out. So I'm like, is this Aleister Black a heel turn for Aleister? Maybe it could be, just by what we saw. But overall, segment was just meh. And then we had Charlie Caruso. She ended up approaching Sasha and Bayley in the back. Sasha and Bayley were both arguing, and they ended up saying that they're confident about Sasha winning the Raw Women's Championship back from Asuka. And they said they're going to get payback on Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. So that was that. And then we go to a fatal four-way for the Jobber Ninja Turtle 24/7 Championship. R-Truth versus Akira Tozawa versus Cedric Alexande versus Shelton Benjamin. Why is this on the show? Why was this on the damn show? This was shit. This was garbage. We had Akira Tozawa and his Foot Clan out there, known as the Ninjas. And we had Akira Tozawa win the match, rolled up R-Truth. Whatever. Garbage. Absolute garbage. So then we had Mackenzie Mitchell. Mackenzie Mitchell, she is one of the interviewers who are from NXT. She ended up stopping Randy Orton, and she ended up asking if he has any response to what Drew McIntyre said earlier. Randy Orton ended up telling Mackenzie Mitchell, yes, he does. And then he walks to the ring to respond to McIntyre. But whenever I look at Mackenzie Mitchell, I don't know if you all look at her this way when you guys watch NXT. Doesn't she remind you of Mandy Rose? Like she looks exactly a little bit like Mandy Rose. So that is what I see in Mackenzie Mitchell. I see Mandy Rose 2.0. She looks exactly like her. And then we had Randy Orton come out. Orton ended up getting on the mic, and he ended up saying about how he's done what he wants for the longest time to whoever he wants to do it to. He ended up saying that didn't happen at SummerSlam. He ended up saying that he promised everyone that he would RKO McIntyre and kick him in the head and take the WWE Championship. But he didn't. Orton ended up saying that you can call him a lot of things, but one thing he is, and forever will be, is a man of his word. He ended up saying that he promised that he'd kill various legends, and he did, because he is the legend killer. Orton went on to say that McIntyre came out earlier and was presented with the opportunity to kick him in the head. And he said so he did. And it felt so good. Orton ended up saying that he kicked McIntyre twice because he offered Orton a rematch. And he was like, who the hell do you think you are? And Orton ended up saying that he is the legend killer. And then out came an NXT call-up who is now on the main roster. And that guy was Keith Lee. Keith Lee made his way down to the ring, and WWE here, they just changed everything with Keith Lee. They gave him new music, which was absolutely terrible, generic music. And I'm like, what was wrong with the music that he had, the entrance music that he had in NXT? What was wrong with it? Sorry about that, but I was saying, what was wrong with Keith Lee's entrance music that he had in NXT that they had to change here? Nothing was wrong with it. So he came out with terrible, new, generic entrance music, new ring gear, which looked terrible. So, but Keith Lee made his way out, and he ended up getting on the mic, and he ended up saying that Orton seems a little perplexed. Keith Lee ended up saying that would make sense, as they haven't been properly introduced. So Keith Lee ends up introducing himself, and he ends up saying that he's come here to offer Orton this spectacular opportunity. He ends up saying this luxury, this privilege to stop what he's doing for just one moment and bask in his glory. And with this with the whole Bask in His Glory thing. If WWE mistreats Keith Lee on the main roster, since we all cheered, oh, bask in His glory. If WWE, keeps, doing this with Keith Lee, in future matches that he has, we're all going to be chanting, oh, buried in His glory. That's what we're going to be doing if WWE, buries Keith Lee. And, they put him with Randy Orton here for tonight, which I will get to in a match. So Keith Lee ended up going on about how Orton has been called the Viper, the Apex Predator, the Legend Killer, and he ended up saying that he has been called many things also. Game changer. And he said one thing is for certain. He's limitless. And he says since the Limitless One is here, since his not so good friend Orton is looking for a fight. So he ended up saying with respect to his friend Drew McIntyre, Keith Lee ended up saying that he would step up if Orton is willing to accept the challenge for a match. So Orton ended up asking Keith Lee if he wants to fight. So Orton ended up asking again if Keith Lee wanted to fight. So he took off his jacket and he ended up changing his mind. And he ended up saying, oh, maybe later. And that was that. But Keith Lee, already WWE, they changed his music, gave him terrible generic music, gave him terrible new ring gear, which the gear that he wore in NXT was perfectly fine. So it's just what Vince wants. Vince wants, nothing that Triple H has done with these NXT superstars that have come up from NXT to the main roster. Vince wants to do it his way. So that proves, when Triple H handles these talents in NXT, he does it the right way. But then we had Charlie Caruso. She was backstage with Zelina Vega, Angel Garza, and Debbie Burnett from The Bachelor, which I don't know why she's still here. What does she bring to the show? So Charlie Caruso ended up asking if Zelina Vega is finally ready to admit she poisoned Montez Ford. So Zelina Vega ends up sticking to the story and says the footage proved nothing. So Angel Garza then interrupted, and Zelina Vega ends up telling him that he's not helping her. And he's just saying things that don't make sense. So Garza ended up talking to Demi, and she ended up speaking to Ivar over the weekend. So Garza ends up telling Demi that she can come watch the match next. So, and then we have Garza flirting with Charlie Caruso, as usual. So that was that. Then we went to Angel Garza versus Montez Ford. Montez Ford ended up getting the win. Montez Ford ended up hitting a crossbody on Garza. There was a point in the match where Ivar ended up approaching Demi. He ended up giving Demi a turkey leg. Ivar then ended up asking Demi Burnett if she wants to get out of here. And she does. And so Burnett ended up walking away with Ivar. Garza then was yelling at both Ivar and Demi from the ring. But Montez Ford ended up getting the win. Overall, the match itself, awful. So then we had Nia Jax end up approaching Shayna Baszler backstage. Jax ended up saying that she's thought about it. And she thinks that they can win the Women's Tag Team Championships together. and that she wants the titles. Baszler ended up saying that if she helps Nia Jax with that, she wants Nia to get off her back and leave her alone. Nia Jax ended up telling Shayna Baszler that as long as Shayna Baszler follows her lead, that Nia Jax could get off Shayna Baszler's back. So that was that. So then we went to Peyton, Royce, and Billie Kay, the Iconics, and Zelina Vega versus Liv Morgan, Ruby Riott, and Bianca Belair. You had Bianca Belair, Liv Morgan, and Ruby Riott win the match. Bianca ended up hitting the KOD on Zelina Vega, the Kiss of Death. So there you go. Bianca, Liv Morgan, and Ruby Riott win the match. Moving on. We had Ricochet and Cedric Alexande backstage. They were having an arm wrestling contest because it was announced that we were going to have Bobby Lashley and Apollo Crews having a arm wrestling contest, which was god-awful, which I'll get to. So Mark Henry, WWE Hall of Fame Mark Henry, walked up to them, and he ended up saying that he hates to interrupt their fun, but he has to take the equipment that was there. And so MVP ended up interrupting. He ended up asking Cedric why he's back here goofing around instead of trying to get the Jobber Ninja Turtle 24/7 championship. So MVP then ended up accusing Ricochet of abandoning Cedric last week. And so MVP once again ended up trying to get Cedric Alexande to take the offer and join the Hurt Business. And that was that. Then we had the arm wrestling contest, which was god-awful. And Mark Henry was out there. And he ended up saying that this whole arm wrestling contest is about how this will determine the strongest. Something he knows all about. He ended up saying that he already told Mustafa Ali, Cedric Alexande, MVP, and Shelton Benjamin to stay in the back. So Bobby Lashley ended up was out there. He ended up saying that he doesn't need MVP or Shelton Benjamin. He ended up saying because we all know how this is going to go. He says he's not going to beat Apollo Crews up too bad, so he can beat him up again at Payback for the United States Championship. So Lashley ended up calling Apollo Crews a little man. So Apollo Crews, he was also out there. He ended up saying, "Oh, that's funny." So Apollo Crews ended up telling the win over MVP and that he's confident about Payback, and says he will also beat Bobby Lashley in this arm wrestling contest. So we had a point where Lashley ended up having his foot under the table, and Apollo Crews ended up stomping on Lashley's foot, which of course it's illegal to have, your foot under the table, to try and cheat in a arm wrestling contest here. So Apollo Crews ended up stomping on Lashley's foot, and then Apollo Crews ended up slamming Lashley's arm down. Apollo Crews wins the arm wrestling contest. So Lashley was pissed off. Lashley had some words with Mark Henry. Lashley went to attack Apollo Crews. Apollo Crews ended up fighting back. And Apollo Crews ended up sending Bobby Lashley out to the floor. And then Apollo Crews then leapt to the other side of the ring. He ended up taking down MVP and Shelton Benjamin ringside. And that was that. God-awful. This was god-awful. So then we had Dominic. He was backstage with his father, Rey Mysterio, and his mother, Angie. So Charlie Caruso was with them. She was asking for comments on last night at SummerSlam and, what we're going to see tonight. So Dominic then ended up admitting that, he was being nervous but his family was backing him, and it gave him courage to go out there and get the job done. Of course, I guess he was speaking about last night at SummerSlam. So Ray ended up going on about family. He ended up saying that Rollins will have to deal with his family being together for the rest of his life. Ray ended up saying that his son, Dominic, became a man last night, and that he's proud of him. Now he's been dreaming of sharing the ring with his son for years. He ended up saying that he'll be damned if Seth Rollins can ruin this moment. So Ray ended up putting over Dominic, and he ended up saying that they are looking at the future of Monday Night Raw. And that was that. And then we saw Lana and Natalya in the ring. This was terrible, which Lana was praising Natalya on the mic. And they're just shitting on Mickie James. They're paying tribute to Mickie James. They went on about how Mickie is riding their coattails. And Natalya ended up saying that tonight they will retire. The chick with the kick. Mickie James, of course. And then Natalya was like, oh, she will get her Hall of Fame induction on her own because she's the greatest of all time. So Natalya ended up telling us to watch this reel that she worked hard on to put together, showing highlights from Mickie's career. So she rolls it, and it's just blank. There's nothing. So they end up laughing, both Natalya and Lana, about that being Mickie James's career. Mickie James comes out. She ends up knocking out Natalya. Lana ends up coming over. Mickie James ends up dropping Lana with the chick kick. And that was that. God awful. And then we saw Shane McMahon backstage ready for Raw Failure Ground. And we saw the Hurt Business ends up walking up to Shane. Bobby Lashley then ended up asking Shane that he wants to fight tonight. And he doesn't care who it's against. So Shane ended up telling Lashley, you've come to the right place. So the Hurt Business ended up entering the Raw Failure Ground door. And Monday Night Raw went to commercial. Then when Monday Night Raw came back from the commercial, Bobby Lashley was in the ring, in the Raw Failure Ground ring. Dolph Ziggler ended up stepping up, and both him and Bobby Lashley went at it. And then Dolph Ziggler was also had to face Eric of the Viking Raiders later on, and did not give a shit about this. Do not give a shit about Raw Failure Ground. So, moving on. Keith Lee versus Randy Orton. This pretty much was this could have been a pay-per-view main event. But WWE right here is like, oh yeah, let's give this away. So, Keith Lee versus Randy Orton. Keith Lee, he was decent here. But the match ended in a disqualification. Randy Orton ended up winning because McIntyre ended up attacking Randy Orton. And the reason why they did this is because both of these guys can't lose. Keith Lee just made his main roster debut tonight, and Randy Orton is on this winning streak with him being one of the best heels on WWE television right now. So neither guy couldn't have lost. So after the bell rang, after the referee called for the bell, McIntyre ended up pulling Orton out of the ring, beat up on him. Orton went running away through the crowd area. And that was that. And then we're getting Keith Lee versus Randy Orton at Payback. But, also this setup for, them to have the match at Payback. That was that. So, yeah, but neither guy couldn't have lost this. But we're going to see it at Payback. Who knows how that match at Payback's going to go? Probably McIntyre is going to interfere in that match also. So it's going to be another disqualification, possibly. Payback is just really going to be a rematch pay-per-view. Payback's going to be a throwaway pay-per-view. Why did WWE book Payback a week after SummerSlam? Makes no sense why we got to have Payback 1 week after SummerSlam. So then we saw, Roman Reigns return at SummerSlam, and when I saw that, I'm like, Roman's back, okay, but it's just going to be, Roman versus The Fiend Bray Wyatt, and they're going to have the Universal Championship on the line, which The Fiend Bray Wyatt ended up winning. He won back the Universal Championship at SummerSlam, and it's just going to be, we're going to get The Fiend Bray Wyatt versus Roman Reigns, and they're going to put the Universal Championship on Roman. And I'm like, great. Just great. And, of course, they're going to have a triple threat match at Payback. It's going to be Roman Reigns, Braun Strowman, and The Fiend Bray Wyatt at Payback. And they're going to have a contract signed Friday on SmackDown. We're going to get that Friday. And then we had Charlie Caruso. She ended up stopping Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre ended up saying that he's really happy for his friend Keith Lee, but he doesn't need anyone fighting his battles. So Charlie Caruso ended up asking him about Randy Orton and what's happened. McIntyre ended up saying that he doesn't feel good because Orton tried to end his career. So McIntyre then turned to the camera to address Randy Orton. And then once again we had Orton attack McIntyre from behind. Orton then delivered a third kick to McIntyre's head. And that was what we saw. Officials end up rushing over to get Orton off of McIntyre. The officials end up checking on McIntyre. So that was what we saw then. Monday Night Raw went to commercial. Then when Monday Night Raw came back from commercial, we saw Charlie Caruso outside of the trainer's room where McIntyre is. Charlie Caruso then ended up saying that she overheard doctors talking in the room. She ended up announcing that it sounds like McIntyre could have a potential skull fracture and possible bleeding on the brain, which could be a career ender. So Charlie Caruso ended up saying that that's just what she overheard from the doctors in the room, and it wasn't confirmed, and that she would be back later with an update. So, there you go. And then we had the Lumberjack match. Raw Women's Championship on the line, Sasha versus Asuka. We had the Lumberjacks. We had Bianca Belair, the Iconics, Ruby Riott, Liv Morgan, Natalya, Mickie James, Shayna Baszler, and Lana. They were down there. Pretty much that's basically the whole Raw Women's division. So, match itself was just meh. Didn't even care for it. Asuka won the match because we had Bayley end up grabbing a chair from under the ring for Sasha. Shayna ended up stopping her, and Shayna ended up kicking Bayley. And Asuka ended up taking advantage of that distraction, and she ended up applying the Asuka lock to Sasha. Sasha ended up tapping out. So there you go. Asuka ends up winning the match, retaining the Raw Women's Championship. Moving on, we saw an ambulance driving away backstage. Charlie Caruso ended up saying that McIntyre is being taken to the hospital to undergo testing. So Keith Lee then ended up approaching Charlie Caruso. Keith Lee ended up saying that a big part of him wanted to tell McIntyre not to interfere in his match, in his debut match. He ended up saying that he understands and just saw his friend get taken away in an ambulance. Keith Lee ended up saying that fortunately McIntyre is one of the toughest men that he's met and that he knows that he will be okay. He ended up saying, but Randy Orton, I could say the same for him. And so Keith Lee ended up walking off. And then we had Tom Phillips then announced that Keith Lee and Shayna Baszler and Dolph Ziggler was announced for Raw Talk, blah, blah, blah. We went back to Raw Failure Ground, where we saw Bobby Lashley fighting with Cedric Alexandre. Lashley ended up applying a submission on Cedric Alexandre. Ivar ended up running in, and Eric ended up trying to make the save, and Eric ended up getting beat down because Ivar ended up running in. Shelton Benjamin ended up getting on the platform, and pretty much the Hurt Business ended up cleaning house at the end of this week's Raw Failure Ground. So, there you go. Raw Failure Ground sucks. So then it was announced that Randy Orton versus Keith Lee was confirmed for Payback, which, who knows how that's going to be. It's probably going to be the same as what we saw tonight, where you're going to have McIntyre interfere in that match at Payback. And then we have Rey Mysterio and Dominic versus Seth Rollins and Buddy Murphy. The main event, which this was a decent match. Didn't see Dominic in the ring last night at SummerSlam, but saw him in the ring tonight here. Did decent here. Really liked Dominic in the ring, him teaming up with his father, Rey Mysterio. And at the end of the match ended in a no contest, and Dominic was going to the top, but the lights end up flickering, and Rollins ended up shoving Dominic from the top, and then we had Retribution end up surrounding the ring, and Rey Mysterio had chased Seth Rollins away, and Rey tried to escort Dominic out of the ring, and Retribution ended up attacking and beated them down. And I'm like, we had 5 members of Retribution here tonight. Didn't we see on SmackDown, there was maybe 10, 15 members of Retribution that we saw? So how do we go from 10 or 15 members that we saw on SmackDown back to 5? It's like WWE, it doesn't know what to do with Retribution. That's what I'm seeing. So Rollins and Murphy were watching from the stage. Rey and Dominic got beat down by Retribution. Dominic ended up getting knocked out to the floor, and Rey was launched face first out to the floor by Retribution. They ended up tossing Dominic into the barricade, and Retribution, 2 members of Retribution, end up slamming Rey into the ring post. And Retribution, they end up standing tall on the ring apron. Seth Rollins and Buddy Murphy were still looking on from the stage. We saw fans in the crowd. They were giving the thumbs down to Retribution. So that was that. That was how Monday Night Raw went off the air. But this whole thing was lame. Absolutely lame. I'm like, WWE, like I said, WWE does not know what to do with Retribution. We saw 5 members tonight. And on SmackDown, we saw 10 or 15 members. It was a whole lot that we saw on SmackDown. I was just taking, guesses of how many members that we saw on that SmackDown. I was trying to count, but they moved too quick. But that was Monday Night Raw tonight. God-awful show. Absolutely terrible. But anyways, that's it for the Monday Night Raw review. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Definitely give the video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and until the next video, I'll see you all later.